The NBA playoffs are here, and I'm getting my bets in on FanDuel. Talk to me, Chuck GPT. What do you know?
All sorts of interesting stuff, even Charles Barkley's greatest fear.
Hey, nobody needs to know that.
New customers bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. 21 plus and present in Virginia. Must be first online real money wager. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
This episode is brought to you by Chevy Silverado. When it's time for you to ditch the blacktop and head off-road, do it in a truck that says no to nothing. The Chevy Silverado Trail Boss. Get the rugged capability of its Z71 suspension and 2-inch factory lift. Plus, impressive torque and towing capacity thanks to an available Duramax 3-liter turbo diesel engine. Where other trucks call it quits, you'll just be getting started. Visit Chevy.com to learn more.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Peak Northwest, an outdoors and travel podcast by the Oregonian and Oregon Live, dedicated to the adventure and exploration of our beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm Jamie Hale.
And I'm Chiara Profena. Together, we take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting destinations in our region, discussing where to go, what to do, and places to see. And today we're doing a quick overnighter to Warm Springs in Central Oregon.
That's right. I feel like there's something appropriate about visiting Warm Springs on these chilly first days of spring. And while the famous hot springs there are a natural draw, there's a lot more to see while you're out there.
Yeah, so how many times have you been to Warm Springs, and what do you think about going in the spring versus, other times of the year?
I feel like I've driven sort of through Warm Springs or stopped off at Warm Springs. Gosh, I don't know how many times. It's right there on US 26 coming off of Mount Hood on the east side. So it's a real sort of drive-through spot. And so I think a lot of people do that. Mm-hmm. I've been there in the heat of the summer. I think it was the last time I was there when Kah-Nee-Ta Hot Springs Resort reopened. And it was so hot. And I remember thinking while I was there, I don't want to get into a hot tub right now.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun.
But I thought, boy, when in the fall or spring, it's going to be so nice. So I just made a little mental note. And then this past spring, it was Oregon spring break. It was sort of right there at the beginning of the season. I booked a night at Kah-Nee-Ta and made a little overnighter out of it.
Well, it sounds like a good little trip out there. Mm-hmm. And tell me about Kah-Nee-Ta. What's out there? Why did you choose that spot?
So Kah-Nee-Ta Hot Springs Resort, this is it was sort of, Kah-Nee-Ta was this big resort that had a huge lodge and a golf course and a pool. And it was this summer destination for generations. And in the last decade or so, they ran into some financial troubles. This is run by the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. It just kind of, it shut down basically. Mm-hmm. And people were really sort of felt the loss of Kah-Nee-Ta for a while. So last year they finally reopened a piece of it. It's not like the whole thing. It's just they've reopened sort of the pool area. They've kind of renovated the hotel there. It's a smaller hotel, and they've renovated their tipi area that you can rent these tipis, and they totally redid all the pools. So now it's sort of this hot spring pool resort.
So more of a go-to destination out there.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is it's turned into, it's not as big as it used to be, but mm-hmm. This is still it become immediately was one of the biggest destinations in that region.
Yeah, and Warm Springs is kind of right between Portland and Bend-ish, as far as I'm aware.
Ish. Yeah, it's closer to Bend than Portland. So I mean, I sort of consider Mount Hood to sort of be something of a middle point.
Okay.
It takes takes an hour and a half or so to get to Government Camper, to get past that area. So by the time to get out to Warm Springs, it's maybe closer to 2 hours, depending on which way you go. So you can go across Mount Hood, but for this trip, when I was going to Warm Springs, there was a big snowstorm on Mount Hood. It was the weather danger and the alert. And so I said, what I'm going to do instead, I was going to take 84 through the gorge and then pop down on the other side and just avoid that whole snowstorm to begin with. And that allowed me to see an extra attraction that I've always wanted to see. And that's White River Falls State Park.
Okay. So you've never been there before?
I'd never been there. It's kind of in a weird spot. It's off of Highway 197. So it's just south of the Dalles. And I kind of always go a little bit farther out, or take 97 or one of these other highways to get down to Central Oregon. But 197 is it's a little connector that goes from the Dalles down to, the Bend area, Madras or so, and can take you over to Warm Springs as well. So this state park is right off of the highway there. I love it. I really thought it was super interesting. So White River Falls is the waterfall there, and it's this like big, very impressive waterfall at this time of year. In the spring, when you get a lot of water flow, it is going in a way that is super impressive. My understanding is that once you get to the end of the season, it kind of dries up a lot. But I went out there and it was really going.
Was it like a hike to get out there and see this waterfall?
Not really. There's usually like in the summertime, there's a big parking area. There's like, a restroom and grassy areas and picnic tables. But that was sort of closed off for the season. So there was just a parking area, like on the sort of gravel parking area by the side of the road, and there was a closed gate. So you parked at the gate, and then you walked in, just like maybe, a quarter of a mile along along the road to get into the park, and then there's just a viewpoint right there over the waterfall, just like that. So you can really easily just walk right up, see the waterfall, and say, "Wow, I've done it." It's beautiful.
Be like, "Huh, that's pretty." Take a picture.
But then there's a trail that leads down sort of closer to it. And this is where things got really interesting. The trail, it starts off pretty easy, then it starts to get a little rough. It's sort of like, you just have to have your wits about you, and it's fine. But it goes down to this old hydroelectric power plant that has since been, decommissioned. And it is essentially a ruin there. It's like this industrial ruin at the foot of this big waterfall. And the waterfall is obviously a big draw itself. But from what I saw, from my personal experience, from what I saw from other people that were there, those ruins are a huge draw too. They're covered in graffiti. Like, there's like a bunch of old industrial equipment in there that's like, closed off and all of that. And like the roof of this building is sort of like halfway caved in. It's very much ruins, and seeing like the dichotomy between like these like old industrial ruins and this like natural attraction was really interesting.
Sounds a little dystopian.
Yeah.
So kind of beyond those ruins and that short little walk, anything else in that area that you would maybe recommend people to see on their way down to Warm Springs?
Well, I will say, just while we're sticking at White River Falls, a lot of people will go down to the ruins and that's it. But I noticed that sort of the path continued downriver along the White River. And as I sort of started poking around back there, I saw someone walking a dog, and she said, "Oh, yeah, you got to go back there. It's very cool." And very quickly became this very quiet desert setting along the river with like these sort of like big volcanic rocks, like these sort of shelves over the river that made a great spot to like sit and eat lunch. So like while I was at the ruins and while I was at the waterfall, there were people milling about. There was like, a lot of dog walkers, people with kids, and a lot of stuff happening. But as soon as I went just a little farther out, there's nobody. And it was just like the quiet, sort of the distant roar of the falls. And like there's a smaller waterfall there. It was just this beautiful, beautiful environment.
Sounds very, very serene.
Oh, it was so good. It was like the kind of place where like I sit down to eat lunch and I send a picture of it to like all my friends to make them jealous.
Hey, it's pretty good job. You get to go out and just enjoy the nature.
It was good. Those moments really do feel good.
And so kind of, was this on your first day down to Warm Springs?
Yeah.
During like midday or?
Yeah, like I left Portland around like 9 or 10, nothing crazy, and got to White River Falls State Park, a couple hours later, walked around. I think I spent maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours there taking pictures and walking around and hiking and eating lunch. And then I got back on the freeway and just went down to the Warm Springs Reservation itself. So the Warm Springs is sort of like the main area of the Warm Springs Reservation, which is the reservation for the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs.
Right.
So some background here is that the Warm Springs people are comprised of 3 different bands of indigenous peoples from around the state. The reservation itself was created in the 1850s when the sort of the white settlers came in and removed the indigenous people from the land and said, hey, we're going to, create this reservation. You have to go there. And for those people who were moved there, it was like not the best spot, right? I mean, it's like, for folks who were living on the Columbia River, for a lot of those folks, there's the fishing is not as good. The climate is less forgiving. It was not the best land. But since then, the Warm Springs tribe has really sort of worked with this land and built it up. Like you said, they built up the Kah-Nee-Ta Resort, which is really cool. And one of the other sort of big attractions there that I have really been wanting to stop at for a long time is the museum at Warm Springs. And the museum tells this story and does so much more. It's sort of like a place for art and history and community right there in the heart of the reservation.
What's the name of this museum?
The museum at Warm Springs.
Okay.
That is the name. Very simple.
Very easy to remember.
Exactly.
And is that like a big destination in itself, or kind of like a good, midway stopping point in Warm Springs to get a little bit of an indoor break?
I think so. I think that's the thing. It's right across the street from the casino in town there. It's right down the street from the gas station. So I think a lot of people will either get gas there or they'll stop off at the Indian Head Casino. But I think the museum is a really, really cool spot to go. Like you said, to get an indoor break, to walk around, to learn a little bit more about the people and the history here, and to see some other exhibits that are on display there. So I did that. I stopped off and walked around the museum. I talked to some of the curators there about the museum. It's a very cool building itself, and in ways I can't really quite explain, but they've used a lot of different motifs from their people and made different parts of the building into different types of those motifs. There's the brickwork on the outside is click-a-tap basket weaving that is based on the skin of a rattlesnake, for example. So it was really cool just to walk around and look at the building. But then there was sort of the main exhibit hall that is the permanent exhibit. It's always open. They've got some rotating exhibits as well, but the main exhibit hall was the only one open when I went. And so I got a chance to walk through that and see a little bit more about what was going on at the tribe and sort of the history of it there.
So is this a primarily history museum? Is there art inside, artifacts? What do they have?
Well, again, I saw just sort of this main exhibit hall. And so the museum opened in 1993. And this is sort of their main piece here. So there's a lot of history. There's you sort of walk in and there's a video that plays about the tribe and sort of about their history and who they are as a people. And there's some artifacts there in cases. So it's sort of a mix of those things. There's a lot of video, there's a lot of artifacts, there's a lot of information. There's some recreated housing structures, which is very cool. There's this whole wedding scene. There's they have this this case where there's full-size mannequins of there's 4 or 5 of them, and you press the button and it shows what a wedding scene would look like, and who's giving gifts to who and what kind of those things are. So I thought that was really interesting as well. There's a lot of interesting little bits and pieces there. One fact about the museum that really stood out to me was that it did feel a little dated in that it was 1993.
Right.
So this is now a couple decades old, and they are in the midst of working on redoing it. So everyone told me we're gonna refresh this, working on getting the funds to refresh this because it is, it's a couple decades old.
Do you know what kind of stuff they're gonna have in the next iteration of the Warm Springs Museum?
They weren't quite sure. They didn't quite tell me specifically. But there's, the interesting thing about it feeling dated, I definitely felt just the sort of the look of it, it sort of felt like a 90s museum. But when I got to the very end, there's this video that displays that's sort of an interview with a lot of the tribal elders talking about their hopes for the future. And there's just these interviews with these elders who are we really just hope that our children and our grandchildren learn the language and learn our culture, learn our ways, and like keep the culture going. And the fact that that was from like the 90s, but is in this museum that is very active and open today, I was like, oh wow, it's happening.
Yeah.
Like they did it. And that was really cool. It was cool to see sort of like this, wish from the past fulfilled in the present. So that aspect of it, of the exhibit being from the 90s, felt like really cool, actually.
Yeah, like you're kind of stepping forward in time, seeing the impact of all the history you just learned about.
Exactly. Because then like I stepped through the door at the end of the exhibit and there's like a birthday party happening there at the museum, and there's kids running around, and like the community is really like active and present there in a way that like it seems like that was the whole goal to begin with.
Yeah. So is this kind of like, also you mentioned a community center, and Warm Springs is a bit of a smaller town as I've heard. So is this kind of one of those cultural centers for the people there? That's
what it seems like. Like there's a lot of space out back, like for picnic tables, and there's trails. Like I said, this whole sort of like area that like there was a party happening. So I imagine that's like sort of like a community gathering space. They have a lot of classes there on like doing beadwork and doing basket weaving. Like it from what I heard, it was very active and very actively used there by the community.
Gotcha. And so kind of stepping back from the museum, what else is there in Warm Springs to kind of see and do?
There's not a ton. I think the casino is the other big attraction, which I did not go to. I have heard that there's a shop in Warm Springs, the Warm Springs Market, I believe is what it's called, that has sort of more cases of like old baskets and other old artifacts, as well as being like a market.
Right.
That was a spot that like if I had more time, I wanted to stop off and check out. I just didn't quite have the time, but that's on my list for next time. And there's like a couple of places to eat. There's a couple of places that sell fry bread. I love fry bread. So they were closed when I was in town, but I also made a mental note of a couple of those fry bread places. So there's, if you wander around town a little bit, there's a bit more you can see. But I think, the museum is your number one stop.
Gotcha. And then where you were staying in Kah-Nee-Ta, was that in Warm Springs?
No, I was staying at Kah-Nee-Ta. So it's like it's maybe like 15 minutes drive from Warm Springs.
Okay.
It's close. It's on the reservation. It's just a little ways north on the Warm Springs River. So I was staying in one of their teepees there. So they have the lodge rooms. They've got like a campground with like RV sites, and they have like a bunch of teepees, like very large teepees that you can stay in. And I've been very curious about like what that experience was like. So I booked it without really having a lot of idea of what it was going to be. I knew it was like a little cold. It was like spring, but it was like pretty chilly still. It wasn't raining. But I booked it and packed like a bunch of blankets and sleeping bag and a bunch of stuff to like try to make it feel comfortable, as comfortable as possible.
Right.
And so I got there, I pulled up and checked in and got to the teepee, and they had, I think the first time I toured these teepees when they reopened the resort last summer. And it kind of just seemed like it was inside just a concrete slab with like a picnic table. And that was what I had in my mind. When I got there, it was basically the same, but they had kind of fashioned a bed out of like a pair of like the sort of like plastic like poolside chairs that like fold down all the way so you can lay down, like two of those together with like a maybe almost queen size like padding, like pretty thick padding on top of it. And so it was like a bed, which was great. Really happy to be off the ground. So I imagine you could bring sheets, bedding, that kind of thing to do that. I had just like blankets I laid down and a sleeping bag and more blankets. And that felt good to me.
So have you ever stayed in a teepee before? Or was this first experience?
First experience, yeah.
So I don't know if you would know this, but is there like a typical experience when you sleep in a teepee that's like, it's just this structure and that's it? Or I guess what's the teepee experience supposed to be like?
I don't know if there's any supposed to at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, like I think a lot of places that do teepees are probably doing glamping.
Right.
So I think it's probably, often a bit more glamorous than this. But I don't know for sure. I think a lot of folks aren't doing teepees for cultural appropriation reasons. So it's cool that the Warm Springs Tribe is. It's sort of an opportunity for people to sort of be in these structures and see what that's like. But it was like camping. It was just like camping, basically. They do have these sort of like propane fire pit heaters inside that you can like pay an extra $20 and they'll fill the propane for you. And that supposedly will like heat the teepee throughout the night, which is nice. I was not planning on that. I like really got all the warmth I needed. So I didn't really need that. But you can definitely get that for a little extra money.
So then sleeping there overnight sounds like you were warm enough, comfortable enough?
Oh yeah, it was great. I guess the one thing is like there's the opening of the teepee. There's like sort of this sort of door you have to kind of crouch through, and there's a flap that you can tie down to the door. And the tying of the flap to the door, I think, was the biggest trouble for me because there's like I just couldn't quite figure out. There weren't like I couldn't get it like it wasn't going to go flush against the door at all ever. So there was like a lot of gap in that, and so I mean there was definitely like breeze coming in through the night. But again, I was like totally prepared. I was fine, but it was not like a totally airtight situation.
Gotcha. And then, so beyond just sleeping there overnight, what did you do at Kah-Nee-Ta at the resort?
The main thing there is the pools, right? So these are like a bunch of pools that hot spring water is pumped into, basically. And it's not like quite like your Brighton Bush hot springs where it's not just like pure water. It's like chlorinated right now. I think my understanding is they're working on a more complex filtering system to have it more pure. But right now they have it sort of like a lot of it chlorinated. So it's sort of like swimming pool vibes. When I first got there at like, 4 for check-in, it was like, this is like, a Saturday, the first Saturday of Oregon spring break. It was like cruise ship vibes. So, I mean, they were blasting Bon Jovi. You had people walking around with cocktails. There were kids running everywhere. It was like that. And as like an adult by myself there, I was like, I am going to wait.
That's fair.
So I just sort of walked around the property. They have like, basketball courts. They have a mini golf course. There's a bunch of hiking and mountain biking trails. So like I walked down the trail that sort of walked along the Warm Springs River, did my thing of, finding the juniper trees and stuff and sitting by the river for a while, and went back. And there's also a restaurant there right by the pools. So I got some food. They've got like burgers and wraps, and they have fry bread there as well with like huckleberry sauce. Very good. Had dinner. And by the time I finished around 6:30, I walked back out to the pools to just scope out the scene, and it was totally different. The Bon Jovi was replaced with like flute music, and the kids were mostly gone. So I was like, oh, it's my time. Yeah. So I changed into my bathing suit and I went to the hot tub. So they have like a couple of big hot pools that aren't like deep. You can like an adult can stand up comfortably, or like hang out in a pool noodle in it. And it's like warm water. And they have like a lazy river there that people love, especially the kids. There's like a volleyball net in the middle of it. There's like a splash pad area for little kids. And then there's like the hot tub, which can fit a bunch of people in it. And I was down for that hot tub. So I got in there, had it almost to myself. There were just like, at most 5 or 6 other people in there, and just chilled out. Got a big bottle of water and hung out in the hot tub for like an hour. It was so nice.
That sounds so relaxing.
Watched the sun. I mean, it was kind of cloudy, so I couldn't see the sunset, but I've got, a little bit of like sunset colors. There's a great view of sort of the hills over the river. So nice.
And so I don't know too much about like hot springs, but how hot is this water, and is it kind of different throughout the property? What's that like?
I'm not sure of all the temperatures, but right. I mean, when you're talking about like hot springs, hot tubs. I mean, like, 102 is sort of like a pretty standard, like, hot tub temperature. Some people will like really get into hotter water if they really are like into hot springs. Typically, like, they'll take the water from the springs and cool it down, because when it's coming out of the ground, it's often a lot hotter than that. So I'm sure they've got a method by mixing it with some cold water, cooling it down so it's more palpable. And I do think that the temperatures do vary across the property. But again, I don't know quite by how much.
Right. And I know that hot springs are really great for just, being there, relaxing, enjoying the water. Are there any other sort of benefits to going to a place like Kah-Nee-Ta and going to the hot springs there?
I mean, people will talk about health benefits for hot springs for various reasons, depending on what's in the water. I'm not sure exactly what is in the water at warm springs, but like, if we're talking about like, down in Ashland, they have like the Lithia springs, the Lithia water, which has lithium in it, which has, certain benefits. So, I mean, you can kind of debate whether or to what degree that the minerals in the water affect you. I do know that after soaking for an hour there, I felt very relaxed and very chill, and it was very easy to go to sleep after that.
Well, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So as long as you had a good experience. Exactly.
The one way I might want to do it differently next time is they have these private tubs there. So you can pay a little bit extra. I think it's maybe like $100 or something like that, a little bit extra. And you can get these little sort of private cabana type things up on just like up on the hill above the river. And it's a sort of a big private tub that fits, probably like 4 to 6 people or something. And you get your own little area, your own little your fire pit, your own little sitting area. And that is a great way to do it, I think. If you get a few friends together, you split the cost, and you can hang out there at the view of the river. Maybe watch sunset from there. That's the way.
That sounds like a pretty good little summer trip, or maybe not summer, but spring, like you were saying, when it's a little bit colder before it gets to this point where it's hot all the time. But what's like the cost associated with this location? Is it really pricey, or how did that kind of shake out?
It's not too bad, really. So when I stayed in the teepee, the teepee prices are about, depending when you go, like midweek you can pay like $119 a night for midweek off season. Once you start getting into like May, June, July, August, they're more like $149 to $179 a night. And that does come with a day pass. Like for, I think the first person gets a day pass, which allows you to do, everything, like, all the soaking and, all of the mini golf and all the stuff. You get like a wrist bracelet that gets you to do all the stuff.
Gotcha.
You can also just do a day pass down there. You don't have to stay overnight. The day passes, I think, are around $29 per person, and that again gets you into all the stuff. You just have more limited time period you're allowed to stay there.
That's not too bad.
No, it's really not.
Yeah.
And it's again a beautiful spot. They just redid it, so everything is like new, which is really cool. And they're still like adding stuff to it. There was a couple things there that like some vending machines. There's like a waffle cart that I would have loved to have been open, but it was not. Like right next to the teepee. Like I love the idea of like waking up, rolling out of bed, and getting a waffle. Like that would have been so good.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
But the restaurant there does serve like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's like a nice spot to hang out inside. There's obviously a couple of bars there. There's an outside poolside bar, and certain times of the year where people can get cocktails and beer and stuff. So it kind of it's like family friendly, but also directed at like adults. So it's really, I think, appealing to everybody.
Yeah, that sounds like a great kind of little spot to check out if you're in the area or need a little relaxing break. Anything else in that area that you were able to see or do?
That was all I did in this trip. I feel like there's a lot more you could do. So, I mean, obviously, you can come back around on Mount Hood and there's everything on Mount Hood. So Warm Springs sort of being just on that side of the mountain. If you're going back to Portland, you can stop off at Government Camp or Timberline. You can stop off at, any of the restaurants along the way. There's like so much to do there. Tamanawas Falls is right up there. Just so much, or you could sort of continue down the Deschutes River or up the Deschutes River, either way. And there's all kinds of parks along the Deschutes. You could go down into Bend and do anything in Bend. So like Warm Springs, I did it just sort of like as like an overnight destination, but it can also be like one stop on a bigger trip throughout that region.
Right. And then anything else in the area outside of Warm Springs and Mount Hood sections kind of Oregon that you would recommend?
Oh, I mean, gosh, there's so much.
Right. That's a pretty open-ended question. But maybe if you're traveling from Portland down through Warm Springs, anywhere else you'd recommend people?
I mean, I'd say like pretty close to Warm Springs is the Cove Palisades State Park. I love the Cove Palisades. It's a really cool spot. It's where three rivers converge in this like big canyon. It is like a human created lake. So there's like a lot of boating on it, but there's this great trail, that leads you up sort of along these cliffs overlooking the lake. And it's just incredible views. You get mountain views, you get river views, you get these canyons, a lot of juniper and sagebrush and animals and birds. It's a very cool spot.
Well, that sounds great for summer as we start getting into the warmer weather now.
Oh yeah. Bring your sunscreen, bring a hat. It's out there. That's the one thing about once we get to the other side of the mountains, it is really exposed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd be interested in checking that out. I love a good lake trip, and I don't feel like I've been to too many bodies of water outside of the Portland metro area. So maybe we'll have to talk more about that another time.
Oh yeah. You can get out there in the lake, but you got to stop at Kah-Nee-Ta and do some soaking too.
Sounds like a really good recommendation.
Well, folks, that is going to do it for us for today. Until next time, you can watch our videos on the Oregonians YouTube channel and view all of our travel and outdoors coverage on OregonLive.com/travel, as well as HereIsOregon.com.
Please leave us a rating or review if you enjoy the show. And if you want to support this podcast as well as our local journalism, please consider a subscription to Oregon Live. You can find details at OregonLive.com/podsupport. Also, if you're a fan of the show and you're interested in potentially sponsoring it, you can get in touch with our marketing people at advertise@oregonian.com. This episode of the show was produced by me, alongside Jamie Hale and Vicki Connor.
Stay safe and happy travels, everyone. Until next time, we leave you with this 10 seconds of Zen.